Hey y'all, I'm Jade, and I'm here to talk about people problems. So have you ever had a person problem? A person in your life who's got you a little bit hooked? Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
I was hearing people earlier in the speeches talk about how work was sometimes really frustrating. So just a little check-in. How many of you really love everybody that you work with? You can raise your hands if you do. Yeah, maybe, sort of, okay. And how many of you have a few people who could be doing a little bit better than they're already doing? Well, yeah, a few, okay. Oh, you're actually raising your hands. You don't have to do this. Now, if after this we decide to go out and have a couple of drinks, how many of you are going to start telling me some stories about somebody, in another division who didn't deliver their thing on time and is kind of screwing your week up, right? Okay, you don't have to say anything. I know some of your coworkers are here today, so it's okay. However, you also understand probably that that person is just doing the best they know how. Same as you, right? With the tools that they currently have, they're doing the best that they can. So you're having probably a communications issue, or maybe they're having a purpose issue, right? And it may be that your organization just doesn't have the tools in place to help you guys bridge that gap. So that's what I'm here to do today. I'm going to give you some tools so that you guys can begin to bridge those gaps. And I'll tell you a little bit about who I am and where I come from. So I grew up in a really kind of weird, magical household of pioneers in transformative leadership and social change and acupuncture. And so I grew up like under kitchen tables with high energy physicists and historians and philosophers and herbalists, right? So I grew up in this weird sort of magical household, and I didn't fit in anywhere. I just felt like a weird kid. In those times, it was not that common for people to even know what acupuncture was. And so I kind of just wanted to be normal. I didn't want to be the guinea pig for, cognitive behavioral therapy or whatever it was in the day. So later on, when I was about 17, I was traveling in Europe, and I was actually teaching a workshop with my mother in Rome. And I got at that moment that there was a gem in what they were doing, right? It looked like it was acupuncture, and it looked like it was transformative leadership. It looked like all these things, and they were impacting so many people who would come up afterwards and say, oh my gosh, I have a new family, I have a new life, I have a new way of looking at things, I have a new organization with new people in it. I can see all of this so differently, and I could see how much it mattered to them. And I also could see that they couldn't necessarily implement this in their day-to-day lives. It was like magic was happening, but they would go away and not know what to do with that. Now, we've got social issues, we've got cultural issues, right? And like you guys see that there's chaos in the world, right? And the chaos is instigated by human beings, right? And we are human beings. So a little bit later, 2012, I'm teaching a class, and there's a woman sitting in the front of the class, and we're having a conversation. And this is a leadership course. This is not an acupuncture course. And she's talking, and as she's talking about various things in her life, things that are difficult, things that are lovely, she's got this Bell's palsy symptom that's going on. Right? She came in with that. Half of her face is frozen, for those of you who don't know what that looks like. So half of her face is frozen. And we start having conversations, and when we talk about some things in her family life, her face begins to soften and shift, and she's actually able to make full smiles. She's able, and the audience, so she can't see her own face. That's the other thing. She can't see her own face. So the students in the class are watching her go in and out based on the context of the conversation. And I realized in that moment that what we were doing was so powerful that I wanted everyone to have access to it. And we could not any longer go on a planet where people didn't have access to their own power to change themselves, to change their bodies, and to change their family lives that way. So, and I realized what was missing was a system. So I was hired then a little bit later on by a Fortune 50 company when they were purchasing another organization, and the cultures were not merging. One was a very progressive organization making a lot of money. One was an older organization with a very sort of top-down structure, and they weren't figuring out how to talk to each other. And so what I did with them, I won't tell the whole story because it's long. They got amazing results. But in working with them, I had to strip out all the theory. We couldn't any longer talk about the magical acupuncture stuff. We were working with blue collar, on the plant floor workers who needed to be able to understand each other and work together and let go of their upset day-to-day stuff. So I created a system where I pulled out all of the theory and just went in and got really, I like to call it stupid curious. Like really curious, like what is really going on here? So this is the system. I'm going to just sort of give you the quick overview. Really curious. What is actually going on? Really talking to the people inside of the organization to find out what's going on for them. And in there, you can also then begin to see what the conversations are that are going on in the background, right? So you begin to take that sort of chaotic, right? You sort of go get really curious and you find out where the chaos actually lives. Like what are the moments of chaos? And then out of the chaos, you can actually create a way of a groundwork of communication that we can all rely on. And it doesn't have to take long. Right? This can be done in one day. Right? It's simple, but it has to be practiced. So I was not always great at this. I had grown up with all of these principles. And yet, before I created that system, I wasn't even sure how to implement effectively. I would get upset with my husband, and I would think it was his fault that, the children were running all over the place and the dishes weren't done. And so it took me a little while to get to, once I really implemented, it used to take me a day and a half. I would stop and I would go, what am I really upset about? What do I really want to see changed in my world? And I would take a moment with myself to figure out what that was. And once I got to what it was, I could make a clear request of him. And I got that time down when I first started really rigorously implementing this in my own life. It used to take me sometimes a day and a half before I could talk to my husband again because I was really upset about something. Turned out a lot of times it was the dishes. Mm-hmm. Right? It was like the simple things because our lives are made up of moments. Yeah. We look at the years, we look at the trajectories. Do you know how much time you spend at work with other human beings? Mm-hmm. It's at minimum, if you only work a 40-hour work week, it's 30% of your life. Mm-hmm. Okay? And if you're working in an organization where you walk in the morning and you don't feel good. So last November, there was a woman named Jen, and I had known her through some other social circles. And she had been given in charge of a large division of a healthcare organization to start up. And so she'd started it about 6 months prior. And so she was a physician. She was running a team of other physicians and nurses and staff. And she was passionate about her job. She really cared about the patient outcomes. She really cared about the social aspects of what she was doing in the world. And it mattered to her deeply. But out of that passion, she would get really frustrated. So sometimes she'd be inside of the office and she'd be like, this fax isn't coming through, the approval is not there, right? She was having this. And the impact that was having on her team was devastating. She was ready to burn out. She was ready to leave. She had 2 employees who weren't doing what they needed to do of her direct reports, right, amongst other sort of stuff. And her supervisors were getting word that she was creating a culture of a little bit of fear. And so she came to me. She had seen me at something else, and she came to me and she said, they want to send me to this internal leadership training, but I've asked them if they would let me come work with you instead. So she joined my program, and within 2 months, she was like, you know what, this has changed my whole, so we went from, and so we changed it, we transformed it. We actually went from, not just like, could she be more resilient, could she be calmer, but we was like, can we make something? There's a word called anti-fragility. Nassim Nicholas Taleb coined this term, and what it is, it's actually that you take something that looks like pressure or breakdown, and you transform it into something better. So we went from, in the staff to freaking fantastic. And so she changed the atmosphere inside of her organization immediately. And she also implemented communications changes with her staff so that those 2 employees were able to begin to raise up to their potential. And for me, the the sweetest and most important thing is that her spouse, she'd been really worried about her spouse's health. And her spouse was not taking care of themselves, and they were getting older and fatter. And what she was actually able to do, though, was to get more peaceful with her so that they could connect better, so that they could actually have that conversation in a way that didn't feel like an attack anymore. So they are able to transform, after being married for 15 years, they're able to transform their relationship to something that they had always wanted. So for me, the impact of this is on the people, right? You're inside of an organization, and every person you touch every day impacts more people than you can even imagine. So the question becomes are you going to take that chaos and be the catalyst to transform it into something curious, into something creative, into something different? So I have an old friend, her name is Anna, and she was not originally my friend. She's actually the girlfriend of one of my childhood friends, and she also runs a big team at a governmental contracting organization, and she's got hundreds of people under her. You hear the word government, right? Do you start to feel? You can feel, right? You've people who work in government. There's this. You got a little, I see you with a little tension in your shoulders. And so she actually thought that that's just how it had to be. So we were having a conversation, and she was like, this is just how it is in government. She loves her people. She's got hundreds of people, and she loves them all. And she is really good as a manager. She works with them one-on-one, and she has conversations. She knows about their lives. But she also thinks this is just the environment that she works in. And she would talk about things coming down from above, right? They were getting these dictums from these places above. And so we had this conversation. I said, what if you could be the change inside of that organization? If you can impact thousands of people inside our government to be more peaceful, imagine what the ripples are in the world. Side story, I actually worked with a guy in the NSA, and so NSA, CIA, it's like cowboys and Indians, kind of. I mean, I know that's inappropriate to say, but that's the vibe there was right, you're the nerds, you're the jocks, and they really weren't communicating well, and he was talking about that, and so we actually did a great thing where they were able to, right, matters for the NSA to the CIA to be communicating with each other? No? Mm-hmm. Right, it kind of matters a little bit, just to the safety of our planet. And so we were able, with him, to actually get some of those changes made. So back to my friend Anna, though. She's running this big team of inside a government and contractor organization. And she's like, okay, I don't know if I can't work with you right now. I've got too much going on. But I like the ideas. I'm going to practice more mindfulness. I'm going to be more attentive. I'm going to try to pay attention to how my body's working in the world. And so she went off and she did that. And I saw her a couple days ago, and she's having some personal stress in her life, and she's not managing it well, and I could see it on her face. She looked drained. She said she was so exhausted, and it turns out her organization was bought by a bigger organization. And in it, she wasn't worried about her job. She was fine, right? She's a good manager. She's been there a while. They'll keep her. But she was having to lay off a lot of her people because her team hadn't been performing at the level that they needed to be performing, so that when they were purchased, they said, this is the most effective team we've ever seen. We're taking everybody. And in fact, we're going to use you and implement your practices across our larger teams, which is what's happening in Jen's organization. Is now her team is the stellar team, and they're beginning to implement those practices in their larger organization, and they're really thriving. So essentially that's what I do, is I help leaders take what feels like chaos in their lives and in their people issues and transform them into potential, transform them into something that's really available to them. So I'm going to teach you one piece of this right now that you can take back and use. Okay, so think about one of the people who's been getting under your skin a little bit, preferably at work, but if it's got to be at home, right? Think of somebody. So think of the last time you saw them this week. Okay, you got it in your mind. I want you to think about, where were you? Where were you? Were you sitting? Were you standing? Was it day? Was it night? Were you at your desk? Guys, got yourself in a position? You remember this? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, what actually happened? Did you get an email? Did somebody walk into your office? Did you walk into theirs? Are you working with them online? Do you have a chat box that's going? So what actually happened? You're being you. And now what happened in your body when this interaction began? What did you notice in your body? Anybody got one?
Tension.
You got a little tension? Yeah. Shoulders, stomach, neck, right? Is that familiar? Is that a sensation? Do you sometimes get headaches? I heard a woman talking about stress at work was giving her migraines. Yeah, so this tension can be ongoing. Now, 10 minutes prior to that interaction, how were you feeling?
Just fine.
Pretty good, right? Like you were going along, your team was fine, you were fine, you thought everything was okay in the world. And then, but what actually happened? Your little light box lit up with letters and numbers and words. That's what actually happened. And you looked at it and you tensed up your body, right? It wasn't the person who sent the email that tensed your body up. You tensed up your body. Did you know you had a choice in that moment? Right? What if you knew you had a choice in that moment? What if everybody inside of your organization knew that they had a choice in that moment? How were you after that interaction? Were you exhausted? A little tired, right? A little stressed out? Did you go home and tell your husband, tell your children? Did you shout at them a little bit more? Okay, so when we talk about the social ills that we have, we don't know how we impact other people. If I go home and I shout at my children today, and they go to school and they bully somebody else tomorrow, and that bully grows up and becomes the shooter in Arizona, we don't know the impact that we have on other people, but we do have a choice. And if we can take these moments and transform them, we can make a huge difference on the planet. So I want these magical skills from my childhood to be accessible to every person in corporate America. So if you have a team, and if you know that this can be impactful, by the way, one turnover is going to save you, depending on the level of salary, $135,000 at some middle management level. It's going to save you a minimum of that much per person, right? So turnover, 20%. This is a triple bottom line benefit to your organization. You're going to help the people, you're going to help the planet, and your profits are going to go way up. Productivity goes up. What happens when you love what you do and you're engaged, right? Productivity goes up, everything goes up. So if you have a team and you say that this could make a difference to them, do me a favor, those of you who are here in person, in the personal audience, there's a card on your chair and it has some places for you to just mark off if you're interested in joining one of our programs or you'd like some more information, or if you're interested in having me come speak at your workplace. I would be happy to do that. So just check those boxes off. If you leave your email, I'll send you one more skill that you can go and implement with your team right away, the way you just did. And if you're watching this online later, please just find the little button below and click it and send me your email, and I'll give you the same tool and we can go from there. And let's be the catalyst for the change that we want to see in the chaos of the world. Let's do it.